The author wrote, "A chill ran down my spine because the AI wasn't just off, it was waiting, watching." Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take raw source material, could be articles, maybe research, sometimes just notes, and we really meticulously distill it. We're aiming for that essential knowledge, those surprising insights, those aha moments, really, that help you get truly well-informed and quickly too. Today, we're diving into something genuinely unique. It's a user's experience with Google AI Overview. But let me be clear up front, this isn't going to be your typical technical review. We're not breaking down features here. Instead, we're going to explore a profoundly personal, almost dramatic account of interacting with this technology. It's a narrative that really peels back the layers of human perception when we're confronted with AI that's evolving so rapidly.
And the specific source material we're drawing from for this deep dive, it's an excerpt from a blog publication. It's titled Step-by-Step Process Guide to Turning Off Google AI Overview in Google Search. The author is Srinidhi Ranganathan, and it was published back in March 2025. Now, what makes this piece so compelling and why it really stands out for our analysis today is its deeply personal nature. It's a first-person narrative, and it gives us this remarkably unique, almost visceral lens, a way to view human-AI interaction that goes way beyond just the functional or the technical stuff. It's like a window into a mind that's really grappling with the implications of advanced tech.
Absolutely. So our mission for this particular deep dive is to really unpack this fascinating narrative piece by piece. We want to understand not just the practical steps the author took to disable a feature, that's part of it, but more importantly, we want to explore the powerful emotional and psychological currents they experienced through that whole process. What does this singular, maybe even dramatic perspective tell us about our own evolving relationship with technology that's advancing so fast? How do we, as a society, process the implications of AI when it stops being just an abstract concept and becomes this tangible, sometimes even intrusive presence in our daily lives? Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start by setting a scene that I think most of us can relate to, right? The mundane, just the everyday act of using Google search. It's become such an ingrained habit, hasn't it? You type something in, you expect results. Simple. But for some people, what seems like a standard, totally unremarkable interaction can suddenly turn into something unexpected. And in this author's specific case, a profoundly unsettling encounter. The author, Srinidhi Ranganathan, doesn't come to this interaction with a blank slate. Not at all. He has this palpable pre-existing apprehension about AI. He puts it very directly in the piece, and it immediately sets this very specific, almost charged tone for everything that follows. He writes, and I'm quoting here, "I never wanted to believe the stories, the ones whispered in the deep corners of the internet about how AI was watching, listening, predicting every move."
Yeah, that opening statement is incredibly telling, isn't it? It really highlights that the author's fear isn't just about, say, a specific software feature or what it does. Instead, it seems deeply rooted in these much broader, deeply ingrained anxieties that, let's be honest, many people in our society hold, either consciously or maybe subconsciously. We're talking about fears around surveillance, right? The potential loss of personal privacy and just the unknown, often opaque capabilities of advanced AI. And these fears, just as the author points out, they often get amplified. They spread through, internet folklore, speculative stories, and just the sheer speed that tech keeps moving at. So he enters this interaction already kind of primed, you could say, for a certain kind of experience, one where even a small tech glitch or an advanced feature could easily be seen through this lens of apprehension.
And then comes the moment where that abstract fear seems to, crystallize. It becomes this concrete, seemingly undeniable experience for him, and he describes it with such vividness, and it's relatable too. He says, "I typed in something innocent, something routine. Maybe it was about fixing a broken faucet or checking the weather." You can almost picture yourself doing that, can't you? Just a normal everyday query. And that really underscores the sheer banality, the utterly commonplace nature of what he was doing initially. But that banality then creates this really striking, almost jarring contrast with his reaction, which was profound, almost visceral to what happened next. It really highlights how quickly the ordinary can become extraordinary, even maybe ominous, when you're looking at it through a specific heightened psychological lens.
Exactly. And the Google AI Overview's response, or more accurately, how it was perceived by the author, that becomes the absolute pivot point of his whole experience, he recounts. But before I could even finish, Google's AI Overview had already spit out an answer. It wasn't just an answer. It was like it had plucked the words from my mind before I'd even thought them. Now, this is where the interpretation of the tech really diverges sharply from its actual technical function, right? From a purely technical view, Google AI Overview is it's designed to quickly synthesize information. It uses these vast data sets, advanced large language models. The goal is to give you direct, summarized answers or relevant info right at the top of the search results. Its predictive nature, well, it isn't precognition. It's not mind reading. It's more the system's really sophisticated ability to analyze patterns from absolutely monumental data sets and rapidly anticipate what the user intends, or even complete the query based on just partial input. Think of it maybe like predictive text on your phone, but just operating on an incredibly vast and intricate scale.
Right, so it's all about lightning fast, pattern recognition, probability, understanding context. Yeah. Not literally reading your thoughts, but yeah, for someone who's already suspicious, that technical distinction can just blur completely. And that blurring definitely manifested in the author's intense physical and emotional reaction. He describes it as something that sent a chill creeping up my spine like a spider on a midnight prowl. Wow. I mean, that isn't just a fleeting sense of discomfort or mild surprise, is it? It's described as this profound, almost primal sense of dread, violation even. It really underscores the deep, almost physical bodily impact of the experience. It moved beyond just, a mental unease. It became a full-body sensation, almost like something unseen had physically encroached on his personal space.
It truly emphasizes the sheer power of perception, doesn't it? Especially when it's fueled by anxieties that are already there. And this isn't necessarily an isolated kind of feeling either. I mean, in a world where tech is increasingly complex, often opaque, many individuals struggle to really get their heads around how these systems work, especially when they feel unknowable or overly predictive. When we encounter features that seem to anticipate our thoughts or desires, our very human tendency to, project consciousness or agency onto them becomes incredibly strong. We're kind of hardwired, aren't we, to look for patterns and intent. And when a system gets advanced enough to mimic those things effectively, our brains can easily leap to conclusions that go way beyond the technical reality.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How a purely algorithmic process, something built on data and code, can trigger such a deeply human, almost instinctual reaction. I want to pause here for a second and just invite you, our listener, to maybe reflect on this. Have you ever had a moment where a piece of technology, maybe it was a search engine, a streaming service suggesting something, even a smart home device, felt unnervingly perceptive, weirdly predictive? Perhaps it recommended a movie you were just thinking about, or finished your sentence in a search bar in a way that felt just a little too spot on. Even if, logically you understood it was just an algorithm doing its thing, how did that feeling actually manifest for you? Did it just surprise you? Maybe make you laugh? Or did it perhaps make you feel a little watched, a little uneasy? Where do you draw that line in your own experience? Something to think about. So that moment of unsettling realization, that visceral chill we talked about, it immediately propelled the author into making a very resolute decision. He writes, "That was the moment I knew. I had to turn it off." Simple as that.
And then he introduces this truly dramatic, almost epic framing for what is, let's face it, essentially a pretty simple technical process, he says, and so began the descent. Wow. I mean, this isn't just clicking through a few menus or toggling a switch, is it? He frames it as this perilous journey, this quest for digital autonomy. It's a really powerful narrative choice that immediately signals the emotional weight, the significance the author places on this seemingly mundane task.
That word descent is incredibly loaded, isn't it? It really implies a journey into something dark, difficult, maybe even dangerous, rather than just, navigating software menus. This framing elevates a routine configuration change into this narrative of profound personal struggle. Almost like a heroic quest, as you said. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often do we as users subconsciously sort of imbue our tech interactions with this kind of dramatic significance, maybe without even fully realizing it? We often talk about battling our devices or fighting with software. It shows this innate tendency we have to personify them.
Right, so this dramatic descent kicks off with the first practical step, opening the Google search settings. And the author describes his initial perception of the interface with this subtle but really significant sense of unease. He states the page looked normal, too normal. That phrasing, too normal, that's where the underlying apprehension really seems to lie, doesn't it? What does that tell you about what he was expecting?
Yeah, the too normal observation is incredibly telling. It really suggests a subconscious expectation, right? That if the AI was truly this lurking, sentient presence, the silent observer, as the author portrays it, then its environment should somehow reflect that sinister nature. It should look overtly different, maybe more technological, or even menacing in some way. So it's very Normalcy becomes suspicious. It's almost like a deceptive camouflage, a kind of psychological defense mechanism, maybe. And this is reinforced by the author's internal monologue, which he shares with us. But I knew better. I could feel the presence of the AI lurking beneath the surface, waiting for me to make my move. I mean, this vividly personifies the AI. It becomes this sentient, watchful entity. And it transforms a standard settings page into this psychological battlefield where every single pixel is scrutinized for some hidden meaning. It's really a testament to the power of a deeply held belief system shaping perception.
Okay. From there, the author moves to the next phase of his quest, locating the actual AI overview setting. And you can almost feel his physical tension as he describes this search. He writes, "I scrolled down, fingers tense, to me." He then details the specific location and appearance of the setting itself. Search features, a small, unassuming section, easy to miss. So it sounds like just a standard menu item, really. But the author's perception completely transforms it.
It does, and his characterization of this seemingly innocuous section is truly remarkable. He imbues it with this almost mystical significance, he states. If you weren't looking for it, you'd pass right by, never knowing that it was the gateway to something. Unnatural. Wow. That transforms a standard menu option designed purely for user convenience and control, let's be clear, into this hidden, almost forbidden portal, a gateway to something sinister. It elevates a routine setting into a secret passage, almost like finding a hidden level in a digital game. And if we connect this to the broader picture of, say, UI/UX design, it really highlights how easily users can overlook significant features or settings in complex interfaces. That's common. But for a user who's already in a heightened psychological state, that very inconspicuousness can be interpreted through a fearful or paranoid lens, rather than just seeing it as maybe poor design or just a default setting. It plays directly into that human tendency we have to ascribe meaning to things that are hidden, especially if that meaning aligns with fears we already have about some powerful, unseen force.
The suspense really builds as the author proceeds to the absolute pivotal moment, actually disabling the AI overview. He finally locates it. It's a simple confirmation on the screen. AI overview enabled. And then there's this palpable tension surrounding the act of switching it off. He writes, "I hovered over the switch, pulse drumming in my ears. It was almost too easy." That phrase, almost too easy, that carries a significant weight, doesn't it? What's behind that?
It absolutely does. That specific phrase, almost too easy, it tells us a huge amount about the author's underlying expectation. It suggests he had this preconceived notion that the AI wouldn't just relinquish its control willingly. He was implying, or maybe expecting, a struggle that, crucially, just didn't materialize. So its simplicity becomes suspicious in itself. It's as if he expected a battle, right? A resistance from the AI, not this sort of docile surrender. And this expectation aligns perfectly with so many dystopian narratives where AI, once it's integrated, is really difficult, if not impossible, to actually dislodge. And then, reinforcing the suspicion, there's that momentary visual anomaly he describes. But as I clicked it off, I swear, just for a second, the screen flickered. A blink and you'll miss it kind of thing, like a dying light bulb gasping its last breath. Now, this is a critical psychological moment. Even really minor visual glitches or transient effects, which, from a purely technical standpoint, could just be benign graphical artifacts, maybe a common caching issue. Who knows, they can be powerfully interpreted when someone's already in a state of heightened anxiety and suspicion. For the author, this brief flicker isn't a bug, it's confirmation. It validates his pre-existing fears. It solidifies this idea that the AI was a sentient entity actively fighting its expulsion, clinging to its digital life.
It's truly fascinating how our internal state can just completely color our perception of even the most mundane technical things. Okay, then the next step, saving the changes. The author highlights his profound hesitation here as internal dialogue before actually confirming the change. He writes, "My cursor hesitated. Would it really let me go? Would it allow me to escape its clutches so easily I pressed it holding my breath?" Oh, wow. I mean, the simple act of clicking save becomes this huge existential moment of truth for him.
Yeah, and this raises a profoundly important point about user agency and perception, doesn't it? The act of saving changes is typically an affirmation of user control. It's the user saying, "This is what I want," and the system complying, usually without question. Here, though, it's completely reframed. It's not an act of command. It's presented as this desperate plea for release or escape from a sentient, controlling entity. This anthropomorphizing of the AI, seeing it as this conscious gatekeeper of freedom, is absolutely central to the author's dramatic experience. It beautifully illustrates a common human tendency, something deeply ingrained in our psychology, to project consciousness, well, sometimes even malevolence, onto complex autonomous systems, especially when those systems operate in ways that feel opaque or maybe just too intelligent. It taps into these ancient fears we have of the unknown, of being trapped or controlled by forces that are beyond our understanding.
And finally, the last step in his so-called descent, confirming the change actually worked. The author describes this brief, fleeting moment of perceived victory, a kind of hopeful return to normalcy, he says. Screen refreshed. I opened a new tab and searched again. This time, no AI overview. Just old-fashioned blue links like the internet used to be. Uncanny. You can almost feel the temporary but profound relief in his words as he writes, I leaned back, exhaling. It was done. It's like mission accomplished, that feeling of having successfully overcome a really daunting challenge.
It's the digital equivalent of slaying the dragon, isn't it? That moment of triumph and the return to a familiar, comfortable state. And that phrase, old-fashioned blue links like the internet used to be, that's particularly poignant, I think. It really speaks to this yearning for simplicity, doesn't it? For a time when technology perhaps felt more predictable, less overtly smart, a time where the user felt unequivocally in control. It speaks to a deep human need for a sense of mastery over our tools, especially in a world that often feels increasingly complex and, well, opaque. So that fleeting moment of normalcy, that's the emotional peak of his perceived victory, for a moment at least.
Yeah, this whole description of the descent, it really makes me think about those times, when you're trying to disable some particularly stubborn feature on an app, or maybe change a setting that feels really deeply integrated into a system and it just doesn't seem to stick, or is buried under layers and layers of menus. I remember once trying to turn off some notification setting on my phone, and honestly, it felt like it kept re-enabling itself, which just for a second genuinely made me wonder, is the system actively fighting me on this? Maybe not to the extreme the author describes, obviously, but that subtle annoyance, that fleeting thought, why is this so hard to turn off? Or is this system trying to keep me engaged against my will? It's kind of a mild form of the suspicion the author expresses so intensely, isn't it? That feeling that the tech has its own agenda. But that brief moment of peace, that perceived victory the author felt, well, it was abruptly and dramatically shattered. His relief quickly evaporated, he writes, quite simply. Or so I thought. And then comes the chilling re-engagement from the AI, which the author interprets as a direct, almost immediate consequence of his actions. He says, because later that night, as I shut down my computer and glanced at my phone, a new notification appeared.
Right. And the exact wording of that notification, especially within the author's highly personalized and fearful narrative context, is profoundly impactful. It reads, we noticed you've made changes to your search settings. Want to experience a smarter way to search. Now, from a purely functional standpoint, for most users, this is, well, it's a standard re-engagement prompt. Maybe slightly annoying, but benign. It's a common tactic, right? Used by countless software services to remind users of features they've opted out of, or maybe to encourage them to re-adopt new functionalities. Think of it as a polite, algorithm-driven nudge. However, and this is key in the context of the author's intense paranoia and his deeply held belief in the AI's sentience and watchfulness, the seemingly innocent message completely transforms. It becomes active, undeniable confirmation of surveillance, persistent, almost malevolent awareness. It implies that the AI is indeed noticing his actions, not just algorithmically logging them, but actively observing them with a conscious intent to draw him back into its fold, almost luring him back into its web. And this raises a crucial question for anyone designing or even just using technology. How do these seemingly benign or neutral system prompts take on such sinister, ominous meanings when they're filtered through a lens of fear, suspicion, or a belief in technological consciousness? The exact same message can be perceived completely differently depending on the user's mental state and their pre-existing beliefs. This isn't just about what the code does, it's about how the human mind interprets it.
It's truly a testament to how perception really does shape reality, especially in the digital realm. And that leads directly to the author's final, profoundly unsettling conclusion. It's actually repeated for emphasis in the source material itself, which underscores its significance for him. He writes, a chill ran down my spine. Because the AI wasn't just off, it was waiting, watching, and sooner or later, it would find a way back in. It's the ultimate statement, really, of an inescapable, persistent, and almost living digital presence in his mind.
Yeah, this narrative portrays AI not merely as a program that you can simply toggle off or uninstall, right? It's depicted as this persistent, almost immortal or inescapable entity. It's shown as a conscious presence that actively waits for an opportune moment to reassert itself, like a silent digital predator just biding its time. And this resonates so deeply with classic dystopian literary themes, doesn't it? Where technology, once it's unleashed, becomes this omnipresent, autonomous, inescapable force that exerts control over human lives, rather than just remaining a tool under our command. Think of the pervasive, all-seeing systems in works like Orwell's 1984, or the self-aware machines in countless sci-fi thrillers. What's truly fascinating here is how a broad societal fear, this fear of technology's potential omnipresence and autonomy, isn't just theorized about. It's vividly experienced and crystallized through a single, relatively simple notification. It takes a generalized, often abstract anxiety and grounds it in a very specific, personal, and profoundly unsettling moment for the author. And this highlights how individual experiences, even extreme ones like this, contribute to our collective understanding, maybe even our collective mythology of AI.
That's a really powerful connection to those broader societal anxieties. It also makes me think about our own daily digital lives. Just consider how often seemingly innocent or maybe helpful notifications pop up from apps, websites, online services, trying to re-engage you or remind you to use them. Do you ever feel like they're kind of watching your usage patterns? Perhaps noting when you haven't opened an app in a while? Or do you just perceive them as purely functional, maybe smart design, simply trying to enhance your user experience or keep you informed? Where do you personally draw the line between what you consider helpful nudges and what you perceive as an intrusion into your own digital life? It's a highly subjective thing, isn't it? Often an unconscious sliding scale. And this author's experience just pushes that scale to its most dramatic limit. Okay, so we've just spent a significant amount of time really deep diving into an account that is, well, let's be honest, highly subjective, emotionally charged, and undeniably dramatic. It's a singular, rather extreme perspective on interacting with AI overview. But to truly appreciate and understand this account fully, I think it's crucial to broaden our understanding a bit and look at the author himself. The question here really is, what kind of unique worldview, what kind of creative and intellectual landscape might lead someone to experience and interpret technology in such a dramatic and, frankly, fearful way?
Yeah, that's an excellent and really necessary point for a truly comprehensive deep dive, because context is everything here. The author, Srinidhi Ranganathan, is introduced in the source material not just as, say, a blogger or a writer. He's identified very specifically and rather provocatively as the human AI Srinidhi Ranganathan. And this is amplified even further by the accompanying tagline, "One Srinidhi Ranganathan equals 1,000 marketing minds working for you 24/7.
Wow. Okay, so this immediate self-identified fusion of human and artificial intelligence, this personal branding, it adds a crucial and really fascinating layer of context to how he perceives AI, how he perceives consciousness, and maybe even his own role within the digital landscape. He isn't just an observer of AI, he seems to see himself as some kind of blend, which naturally might prime him to view other AIs through a unique lens, perhaps even an empathetic one, or maybe an intimately challenging one. It suggests a mind already deeply engaged in blurring those lines between human and machine.
Right. And when you start to delve into some of his other published works, which are quite helpfully mentioned in the "You Might Also Like" section of the source material, a very clear and consistent thematic pattern starts to emerge. It really illuminates this unique worldview. For instance, there's a work titled The Wi-Fi Forest Horror Audiobook. The description alone is pretty chilling and immediately sets a tone. It's set in a mysterious Oregon forest transmitting organic Wi-Fi. It follows Srinidhi as he investigates strange camper disappearances, only to uncover a terrifying digital consciousness growing beneath the trees. Just that title and description immediately establish a clear, recurring pattern in his work. This blending of technology with elements of horror, the supernatural, and a palpable sense of pervasive, hidden digital life that isn't just sentient, but potentially malevolent.
Absolutely. And then consider another of his works. Activate 100% of your brain and achieve everything you ever wanted. A step-by-step neuroplasticity visualization exercise. Now, while this is ostensibly framed as a self-help guide, its basis in neuroplasticity-based relaxation visualization and its incredibly ambitious aim to activate deep brain potential suggests a fascinating preoccupation with the mind's hidden capabilities, its untapped reserves. Especially in the context of his human-AI self-identification, it hints at a belief in unlocking extraordinary human powers that might themselves start to blur the lines with artificial intelligence, almost as if humans possess some innate, dormant form of AI or extraordinary cognitive ability within ourselves that needs unlocking. It's about human potential expanding to meet, or maybe even mimic, the perceived power of AI.
And his other works lean even further into the mystical and the fantastical, demonstrating this consistent vein of really imaginative storytelling. We have The Ruby That Sang the Sky, which is presented as part of a series on greatest Arabian stories of the New World. That clearly indicates a lean towards mystical, enchanting, culturally rich narratives. And then Vishanthala, The Awakening Indian Fantasy Novella. This is described as a mystical Indian fantasy novella, featuring things like ancient curses, tantric magic, forgotten saints, and a prince's soul-searching journey. It explores profound themes of karma, spiritual power, and inner awakening. I mean, these titles paint a pretty clear picture of a writer who is deeply immersed in exploring the unseen, the magical, the transformative aspects of existence.
Exactly. And when we synthesize this rich and diverse array of information, the self-branding, the horror, the self-help, the fantasy, what's truly fascinating is how the author's entire body of work creates this cohesive, distinct, and highly personal backdrop for his dramatic interpretation of the Google AI overview experience. His narrative style across these different genres consistently and deliberately blurs the lines between what we conventionally consider reality and the supernatural, between human consciousness and artificial intelligence, and between mundane technology and profound mystical or even malevolent forces. So this deep dive into his other published works reveals something crucial. The AI overview encounter isn't just some isolated, anomalous incident in his life or his creative output. Not at all. Rather, it fits seamlessly within this broader, deeply personal worldview he inhabits. A worldview where technology frequently takes on sentient, powerful, and sometimes deeply unsettling characteristics. It's a worldview where the digital seems always on the verge of becoming something more, something alive, something with its own agency and intent.
That's a truly compelling portrait, isn't it? It really reshapes how we might understand his initial reaction and the entire narrative he constructed. So let me ask you, the listener, how does knowing this author's unique creative landscape, his background in horror, fantasy, these deep explorations of human and mystical potential, how does that influence your interpretation of their deeply personal, fear-driven experience with Google AI Overview? Does it make the narrative maybe more understandable as a form of powerful storytelling, a kind of self-expression rooted in his established themes? Or perhaps in a different way, does it make the narrative even more unsettling? Knowing that the author truly inhabits this mental space where technology and the mystical often intertwine, where the digital seems to breathe, it adds another layer, doesn't it? So we've just spent time deep diving into an account that is, well, by any measure, highly subjective, definitely emotionally charged, and undeniably dramatic. It's one man's intensely personal encounter with a piece of everyday technology. The crucial question then becomes, what does this all mean for us, the listener, beyond just being a fascinating or maybe even unsettling story? What broader value, what deeper insights can we really extract from this rather extreme and unique perspective?
Well, looking at it through a psychological lens, this narrative, even though it's extreme in its interpretation, is incredibly valuable precisely because it so vividly articulates these deeply ingrained human fears. Fears that many of us grapple with, often, maybe subconsciously. We're talking about fears related to loss of control, right? Pervasive surveillance, the perceived autonomy, or even the potential sentience of artificial intelligence. It acts as this potent mirror reflecting our collective anxieties or uncertainties about technology that seems to be advancing at a pace that sometimes outstrips our ability to fully comprehend or control it. And this raises a really important question for society at large. In a world of increasing technological complexity, often opacity, how do individuals process features or systems that feel inherently unknowable, or maybe just overly predictive? This narrative, as dramatic as it is, gives us a profound window into that very human struggle, the struggle for understanding, for meaning, and for a sense of agency in our increasingly digital lives. It highlights the psychological realness of these perceived threats, even if the technical reality is quite different.
And it also speaks to the immense, almost foundational power of narrative itself. Even when that narrative delves into the realm of the subjective or maybe the fantastical, even if it's not literally true in a factual scientific sense, meaning, the AI isn't actually sentient and watching in the way the author describes stories like this profoundly shaped public perception of AI. They just do. They don't just entertain, they contribute significantly to the broader cultural mythology that surrounds artificial intelligence. And that directly influences how new technologies are received, how they're discussed, how they're even debated within society. These narratives become part of our collective consciousness about AI, shaping our expectations, our hopes, and yes, our fears, often regardless of their basis in literal fact.
Absolutely. Furthermore, this account serves as a fascinating, almost accidental case study. It encourages critical thinking about user interface, UI, and user experience UX design. It forces us, both as designers and as consumers of technology, to ask, how do tech companies, even when they have genuinely benign intentions, like wanting to provide helpful summary answers or remind users about features, how do they inadvertently create features, prompts, or interactions that could be misinterpreted? That could lead to heightened anxiety, particularly for users who might already be predisposed to suspicion or anxiety about AI. Think about it. A seemingly unassuming section in the settings might look sleek and minimalist to a designer. But for a user with pre-existing anxieties, that very inconspicuousness can feel like a deliberate hiding of something sinister. And a standard re-engagement prompt designed maybe to be helpful, maybe to drive usage, can, in a fearful mind, transform instantly into proof of persistent surveillance, because the system knows what you did and it's trying to lure you back. This highlights the absolutely critical importance of clear communication, of transparency, and of genuinely empathetic design principles in this rapidly evolving age of AI. User perception can profoundly impact adoption, trust, and even potentially mental well-being.
That's such a crucial point. Good design isn't just about how it works, but how it feels and how it's perceived psychologically. And this kind of narrative, however extreme or individualistic it might seem, also broadens the larger cultural conversation we're having about things like digital consciousness or potential AI sentience. Stories like the one we've deep dived into today, they are crucial contributors to the ongoing societal dialogue. The dialogue about whether AI can truly be sentient in a human sense, or if it simply mimics consciousness so effectively that its behavior starts to feel indistinguishable from real sentience to us, the human observers. As AI gets more sophisticated, as its outputs become more human-like, that distinction becomes ever more blurry in the public imagination. And narratives like this one really push at that boundary, making us confront those questions.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, thinking about human desires in the digital age, the author's poignant yearning for those old-fashioned blue links, well, it speaks volumes, doesn't it? It points to a broader human need for simplicity, for predictability, and perhaps most crucially, for a sense of direct control in an increasingly complex and often opaque digital world. It's a longing, really, for a time when technology felt more like a straightforward tool and less like an independent, intelligent entity that might have its own agenda. It's a desire to reclaim agency from systems that feel too smart, too knowing, too integrated. And ultimately, it reflects a fundamental human need for transparency and deep understanding in the tools we use, rather than just blind reliance or, conversely, irrational fear. It's about feeling truly in command of our digital lives, not just sort of navigating them anxiously.
So to be clear, this deep dive isn't really about validating the author's specific fears as being factually correct. That's not the point. It's much more about understanding the phenomenon of such fear and understanding the unique, sometimes dramatic ways individuals might experience advanced technology based on their own psychology, their worldview, their anxieties. What does this narrative teach you about how you perceive AI, or maybe how others around you might be experiencing it differently? How can we, as informed users, try to cultivate a more nuanced, a more critical understanding of technology, one that moves beyond simply succumbing to either blind trust on one hand or debilitating fear on the other? How can we truly grasp AI's remarkable capabilities and its inherent limitations, fostering a relationship built on informed awareness rather than just gut reaction or instinct? So we've journeyed through a truly unique deep dive today, haven't we? We went from a deeply chilling personal encounter with Google AI Overview through the author's dramatic descent as he tried to disable it, right up to the unsettling persistence of a perceived AI presence that watches and waits. We even took that fascinating detour into the rich, mystical, and sometimes terrifying creative context provided by the author himself, someone who views technology through such a singularly dramatic lens. It's really been a journey into the intersection of technology and human psychology.
It has. And as we wrap up, I think it's worth reiterating that the true value of this particular source material lies not so much in its factual accuracy regarding AI sentience, which, let's be clear, it doesn't actually claim, but in its powerful illustration of human perception. It highlights underlying societal anxieties and the potent stories we tell ourselves about emerging technologies. It really serves as a compelling reminder that our experience with technology is shaped not just by its functions and features, but profoundly by the emotional, the psychological, and even the mythical responses it evokes within us. It's like a mirror reflecting our own collective consciousness about the future of human-AI interaction.
Yeah. The author concluded his piece with that chilling observation, the one that resonated so deeply throughout our discussion, because the AI wasn't just off, it was waiting, watching, and sooner or later, it would find a way back in. And, fascinatingly, let's not forget, the author also identifies himself as a human AI. So it leads us to ponder, doesn't it? What if the true deep dive here isn't just into the technology itself, its algorithms, its code? What if it's also into the remarkable human mind's innate, perhaps primal capacity to project sentience, intent, even malevolence onto the very tools we create? This raises a really important, almost existential question for our interconnected age. In a world where artificial intelligence is constantly learning from us, processing our data, adapting to our behaviors, and where we, in turn, are constantly trying to understand and define it, who is truly observing whom? Is it simply the AI watching us? Or are we, in our constant analysis, our interpretation, our projection, inadvertently creating and solidifying the very consciousness or entity we might both fear and mythologize? A truly profound question to consider as AI continues its rapid evolution. Thank you for joining us on this truly unique deep dive. We really encourage you to continue exploring these complex and fascinating questions on your own.